We are in part 6 of Halloweenish. Today, I make a wet-on-wet pumpkin and use 2 different techniques to make a mummy. No Halloween decorating series would be complete without some sort of pumpkin appearance. I'm not a big fan of the jack-o'-lantern, so instead, I'm going to do a little plaid wet-on-wet action with this small pumpkin. It made the most sense to me to make the flooded portion of this guy orange, so orange it is. You can see here that as opposed to most of the other cookies in this series, I am not flooding all the way to the edge with my one consistency outline and flood icing. This is intentional. With wet on wet, it is easy to cause icing to fall over the edge when adding more icing on top. In this case, since I'm doing a fair amount of plaid striping on the top, I don't want to chance spillage. Looking at it now, this orange is the perfect color for a pumpkin. Since this is wet on wet, all of the icing I use is a flood consistency icing. This is important to ensure that the icing I add on top melts nicely down into the bottom icing. While most of the cookies feature primarily just the orange, yellow, and white candy corn colors, for this design, I thought it would look best if I added in a bit of black as well. And I am not disappointed. You can see as I lay down my lines that there is a little bit of blobbiness on the left side of each line. This is caused by there being a little tiny bit of icing coming out of my bag as I start my line. I'm not sure if there really is a cure for this problem because when you're using a thinner flood icing, it really wants to get out of that bag. Just ask my silicone mat where I place all of my open bags. It will tell you if the bag is kind of full, flood icing likes to flow out, creating a bit of a mess. If you look at the difference between the white lines and the yellow, it definitely looks to me that the larger the hole in the bag, the more likely it is to produce a blob. I must have cut a smaller hole in the yellow bag. This might be really obvious, but I thought it was worth noting. And on that note, it is pretty difficult to cut consistent sized holes in so many bags. We're pretty much eyeballing it as we make our cuts. I suppose it is possible to measure how much to cut off, but the logistics of that terrifies me. No thanks. I'll continue to just take my chances with my eyeballs. When I first started decorating cookies, I was in love with wet on wet. It is the technique that seems to require the least amount of talent with the most visual impact. However, notice I used the word seems there. I am becoming less and less a fan of wet on wet, and in part 7, I will tell you all about why. I mentioned several episodes ago that at some point I wanted to show you what happens inside of the cookie after doing the wet on wet technique. Well, I kept forgetting until now. The effect of the icing cohesion after it's dry is really neat looking when I break the cookie in half. Not my best execution, but I do like the look of these pumpkins. Now for the fun part. You will have to determine for yourself by the end exactly what part was fun. With my edible marker, I'm marking out where the eyes will go so that I leave an appropriate space to pipe in the eyes later. You can see here that I intend to use a piping tip for the execution of this mummy. So I have my tipped bag all ready to go, and since this will be the first time I have ever used a tip like this, I take a few seconds to test it out on my mat, and then using a damp paper towel I always have at my side, I clean up my mess. For now, anyway. Okay, folks, here we go. Have you picked up on the foreshadowing I've been dropping? I pulled this tip out of my nifty set of piping tips my mother-in-law purchased for me on Amazon. Unfortunately, as you can probably tell already, the width of the icing that this tip lays down is a bit too much for the size of this gingerbread-shaped cookie. I intentionally picked the smallest flat tip I could find in my set, and this is what I ended up with. I'm also noticing right away that the start and the end of the ice lines are very rough and frayed looking. I suppose this could work to look like torn cloth. However, I was thinking of more of a wrapped linen look, so to attempt to achieve this, I used my scribe to nip off the ends of the icing. If I do this before the icing starts to set up, it does give the appearance that the icing is wrapping around the edge of the cookie. If I wait until the icing is a little more dry, I will be left with a very angular, sharp edge. I'm using a soft peak piping consistency here, and normally I add white gel color to my icing. For most of the other cookies in the series, the white does have gel color in it. But somehow my quirky, unreliable brain failed to realize I needed to add a gel color into the white before I put it into the 2 bags that required tips. These were the first 2 bags of icing that I made, and when I realized it, I was not interested in pulling the icing out of the bags and doing it all again. And, as I have mentioned in the past, usually the difference is so slight that I believe the non-decorator's eye probably wouldn't even notice a difference between the colored and the non-colored icing unless it gets pointed out. Usually. This is where I'm learning. That's a silly statement. This is where I'm learning? I'm pretty sure all of this is learning. Anyway, I have come to the conclusion that each meringue powder brand acts a little differently and that this particular brand needs the white gel to be added. The consistency itself seems more airy and less dense than the icing where I added the gel to it. And it almost has a see-through quality to it. For this set of cookies, and unfortunately my next series as well, I used the brand Modern Mountain. I know multiple people who swear by this meringue powder, but I am not at all thrilled with it. The package instructions ratio of powder to water is way off in my experience, which at first mixing causes extra strain on my mixer because it acts like extremely thick Gorilla Glue. Then I'm left with adding in a very significant amount of additional water. So no more Modern Mountain for me. I'm going back to the powder that has been the best so far, and that is Bakety Bake Royal Batch. It comes out perfect based on the package instructions and behaves quite nicely whether it has been colored or not. When I first decided to make the mummy this way, I thought it was going to be simple. I was wrong. Outside of having a tip that really is a bit too large for this application, I set myself up for failure by not flooding the surface with white first. I think a mummy should be completely covered and therefore no cookie showing. Well, as you can see, that's a little difficult under my current circumstances. And figuring out exactly where and what direction to place each strip of cloth is also proving to be not simple. Also, this nipping off the ends bit is becoming quite cumbersome. My mom loved the look of this cookie. In fact, she was the one who ate it. She did note, though, that there was a lot of icing on that cookie, making it super sweet. I'm gonna speed this up for you because, quite honestly, it is more amusing to watch it that way. Now for the final candy corn color elements. I have completely outdone myself today. This looks more like the achievement of a preschooler. Tell them what you think, cameraman.
The Egyptians would be disappointed.
And there you have it. The original designed name for this guy was actually Ginger Mummy. But after the piping tip debacle, that first guy just didn't represent the name so well. You can see here I am already putting to good use the lessons I learned today. So if you intend to have no cookie showing through your icing, the most expedient way to achieve this is by starting with a flood layer. Your blood sugar will thank you. Why does this make me think of a chalk outline from an old movie crime scene? I imagine the detective standing over the chalk line on a rainy New York night, flicking a cigarette saying, "This poor Mac, someone got him good." It's no secret around here that my accent impressions are horrendous, but you get the idea. Take a look at this icing and now compare it to the Egyptian mummy icing. There is no comparison. Adding in the white gel, at least in this case, does make all the difference in the world. Okay, I might be just a little prone to hyperbole, but there is a huge difference. This guy already looks 100 times better than the last guy, no matter what my mom says. Here's an alternative and, might I say, much more effective way to create that mummy look. Same basic construction method, easier to execute. Though it still does take quite a bit of time to nip off the ends of the lines, I much prefer this version, start to finish. You tell me, which mummy do you prefer? The Egyptian mummy or the ginger mummy? Only one more to go. See you next time for part 7.
Next time on Kuny's Cookie Chronicles.
We're down to our last 2 cookies of Halloweenish. Today, we finally get to the candy corn and the one cookie missing the candy corn colors.